Welcome to Reading Rainbow with Dr. Segas. I'm going to read to you from Job chapter 1 and some other selections, and I'll offer some colorful commentary as I go. I'll also list the verses that I'm going to read so that you can do it on your own if you want, but you will miss my colorful commentary and my excellent reading voice. So here we go. There once was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. That man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. So we know he's awesome, right? He has gone after wisdom. He turns away from evil. He's blameless in everything. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He had 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all of the people of the East. Notice how each one of his possessions, his children, his livestock, all of it adds up into increments of 10, and that's to indicate fullness. He has everything you could possibly want for. His sons used to go and hold a feast at one another's houses in turn, and they would send and invite 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the feast days had run their course, Job would send and sanctify them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This is what Job always did. So not only does he take care of himself, and he himself is upright, he's also really dedicated to taking care of his kids and making sure their sins are accounted for, right? So his children are also upright. One day, the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and the Satan also came along with them, which can be translated the adversary or the accuser, right? So the Satan came and appeared before the Lord. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" And the Satan answered the Lord, "From going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down on it." The Lord said to the Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." So even God is acknowledging that Job is an upright dude. He has got life taken care of and it's going on for him. And then the Satan answered the Lord, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a fence around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You've blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand now and touch all that he has, and he'll curse you to your face." The Lord said to the Satan, "Very well, all that he has is in your power. Only don't stretch out your hand against him." So the Satan went from the presence of the Lord. Now we're going to find out what happens when God unleashes the Satan on a righteous man. One day, when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the eldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell on them and carried them off and killed the servants with the edge of the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you." There goes his livestock and his servants. While he was still speaking, that servant was still speaking, another came and said, "The fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to tell you." Now he's lost all of his sheep. While he was still speaking, another servant came up and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 columns, made a raid on the camels, and carried them off and killed the servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you, no more camels." While he was still speaking, another came and said, "Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the eldest brother's house." And suddenly a great wind came across the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, all 10 of his kids, and they are dead. I alone have escaped to tell you. So Job has very quickly, through the course of this narrative, gone from having total everything that you could possibly want to having absolutely nothing. Then Job arose, tore his robe, and shaved his head, and fell on the ground and worshipped. Isn't that stunning? He fell on the ground and he worshipped, and he said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all of this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrongdoing. This is really a stunning tale. Chapter 2. One day the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and the Satan also came to present himself before the Lord. The Lord said to the Satan, "Where have you come from?" And the Satan answered the Lord, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to the Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" Notice the repetition. We've already had this question. There's no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. He still persists in his integrity, although you incited him against me to destroy him for no reason. Then the Satan answered the Lord, "Skin for skin. All that people have they'll give to save their lives. But stretch out your hand and touch his bone and flesh, and he'll curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well, he's in your power. Only spare his life." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and inflicted loathsome sores on Job, from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Job took a piece of pottery with which to scrape himself, and he sat among the ashes in a trash heap. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still persist in your integrity? Curse God and die." But he said to her, "You speak as a foolish woman would speak. Shall we receive good from the hand of God and not receive the bad?" In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. It's really interesting. He maintains his integrity this whole time. Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all of these troubles that had come upon him, each of them set out from their home: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They met together to go and console and comfort him. Sorry. When they saw him from a distance, they didn't recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept aloud. They tore their robes, and they threw dust in the air onto their heads, and they sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. Now, this is Job's friends at their best. They're going to get a whole lot worse. When they just shut up and sit there with him, they're doing really well. But when they open their mouths, things get a little bit rough. So they sit with him for 7 days. Maybe we should take a page out of their book, and when somebody is experiencing extreme grief, maybe we should just sit there. I don't know. Because when they start talking, it gets bad. Chapter 3. After all this time, Job opened his mouth, and he cursed the day of his birth. Job said, "Let the day perish in which I was born, and the night that said, a man-child is conceived. Let that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor light shine upon it." So Job is feeling so grief-stricken that he wishes he'd never been born. And then in verse 11, he continues this line of thinking. Chapter 3, verse 11, "Why did I not die at birth, come forth from the womb and expire? Why were there knees to receive me, or breasts for me to suck? Now I would be lying in quiet. I would be asleep. I would be at rest." And so he wishes that he was just dead, because at least then he would be at rest. This is a really, really terrible situation that he's in. He says in verse 24, "My sighing comes like bread, and my groanings are poured out like water. Truly, the thing I fear has come upon me, and what I dread has befallen me. I am not at ease. I am not quiet. I have no rest, but trouble comes." Well, then his friends are going to respond. He goes into this diatribe about how he wishes he had never been born, and his friends, well, they're going to open their big mouths. Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered, and picture kind of a sniveling little brat. He goes, "Oh, if one ventures a word with you, will you be offended? But who can keep from speaking? See, you've instructed many. You've strengthened weak hands. Your words have supported those who were stumbling, and you have made firm feeble knees. But now it has come to you, and you're impatient. It touches you, and you're dismayed. Is not your fear of God your confidence, and your integrity of your ways your hope? Think now, though, who that was innocent has ever perished? Or when were the upright cut off? As I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. By the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they are consumed. So Eliphaz opens his mouth and pretty much says, oh, I'm sorry, I can't help but say something. You've just said that you wished you were never born, and I have to contend with you on that point, because clearly you have plowed iniquity, sown trouble, and now you are reaping the same. What a friend, huh? Then we've got, turn to chapter 8. After Eliphaz shuts up for a second, we've got Bildad who joins in. And Bildad, the Shuhite answered to Job, how long will you say these things, and the words of your mouth be great wind? Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children sinned against him, he delivered them into the power of their transgression. Straight up, Bildad says, your kids must have done something wrong, so God killed them, dummy. Can you believe it? It's crazy. If you will seek God and make supplication to the Almighty, if you're pure and upright, surely then he will rouse himself for you and restore you to your rightful place. Though your beginning was small, your latter days will be great. Job, just repent. Say that you're sorry. You fouled up, and then God will restore you. Some friends, but notably, they are sticking with those binaries and that retributive theology of the Proverbs. Job, people don't suffer for no reason. That's crazy. You must have done something. Your kids, they died. They had to have done something wrong. Quit maintaining your innocence. All right, chapter 11. In chapter 10, Job is going to answer. Job says in chapter 10, verse 1, I loathe my life. I will give free utterance to my complaint. And so he's kind of going along with the Psalms here, and he's like, forget you guys. I can complain if I want to. So I'm going to give full-throated expression to this. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Let me know why you are contending against me. Does it seem good to you to oppress, to despise the work of your hands and favor the schemes of the wicked? He's accusing God of blessing the wicked more than the righteous. Do you have eyes of flesh? Do you see as humans see God? Are your days like the days of mortals? Or do your years go like human years, and you seek out my iniquity and search for my sin, although you know that I am not guilty, and there is no one to deliver me out of your hand? And so Job forms this complaint, much like the laments of the Psalms, and he says, I haven't done anything wrong, God. Why are you contending with me? Are you like a human that you just don't know that I'm innocent? And then he says, but I know that you know. I know you know I am innocent. Then we have chapter 11, verse 1. Zophar, the Nahamathite, is going to answer Job on that one. And he says, should a multitude of words go unanswered? Job, you've just said a whole bunch of stuff. I've got to answer you. And should one full of talk be vindicated? Should your babble put others into silence? And when you mock, shall no one shame you? For you said, my conduct is pure and I'm clean in God's sight. But oh, that God would speak and open his lips to you, and that he would tell you the secrets of wisdom. For wisdom is many-sided. Know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves. Here it gets a little bit interesting, because Zophar says, I wish that God would answer you, because you keep bringing this complaint before God. And so I wish that God would answer you. And then he says, wisdom is many-sided. It's as if he knows that there's a mysterious component to wisdom. But then look at the very last part of verse 6. says, for wisdom is many-sided, which may indicate that there's more to this thing than retributive theology. But then he goes right back on it and he says, know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves. He falls right back on the wisdom of the Proverbs, this idea of retributive theology. Job, you had to have done something wrong. You simply had to have. But we are going to see in the book of Job that wisdom is many-sided. So we have, turn with me to we've got Job, who continues to persist and say, and bring his complaints before God and say, I haven't done anything wrong. His friends continue to say, yeah, you probably have. Then finally, in chapter 38, the Lord speaks. And this is the culmination of this entire book, when God finally addresses Job. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Who is it that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? He's accusing Job of not understanding wisdom. Job, even though he's had this calamity happen to us and happen to him, and we are kind of on his side, it's as if he hasn't quite understood wisdom, because he keeps saying, I haven't done anything wrong. Why is this happening to me? And so God says, well, you don't understand wisdom at all. He says, who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man, and I will question you, and you will declare to me. And then in verse 4, God begins laying out for Job. Well, God questions Job and says things like this. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurement? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk, or who laid its cornerstone, when the morning stars sang together and all of the heavenly beings shouted for joy? Pretty much what God says to Job is, were you there when I created everything? We know who was there, right? Wisdom was there. And God says, you don't understand how the world works at all. I do. I have true wisdom. I created everything that there is. You weren't there. You act like you know the secrets of the universe, but really, you don't. God is going to continue on for a couple of chapters. You should read through it. You should really read through it just for fun. Read 38, 39, 40, because it gets really good. I mean, it is like when you mouthed off to your mom and she just laid into your rear end and was like, you don't know anything. You think you know how the world works? You don't know. But it's God talking to Job. And then Job, go to chapter 40, verse 3. Job answered the Lord, see, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth. I have spoken once. I will not answer twice, but I will proceed no further. So Job says, I was an idiot. I'm sorry. I'm not going to say anything else. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind again, and he says, gird up your loins like a man, and I will question you, and you will declare to me. So God says it again, and he's going to lay into him once again. Job already is like, okay. And God's like, no, you still don't understand. And God goes through all of the different aspects of creation that God is in control of. In chapter 41, he says to Job, can you draw out the sea monster, Leviathan, with a fish hook, or press down its tongue with a cord? Pretty much, can you treat Leviathan, the sea monster, like it's a little goldfish that you caught? No, Job, you can't. And then in 42, Job answers the Lord again. Then Job answered the Lord, I know that you can do all things, and no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is it that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore, I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. He says, here and I will speak, I will question you, and you will declare to me, I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. Therefore, I despise myself and I repent in dust and ashes. So Job comes to this place through the questioning of Yahweh, through the Lord, where he says, I thought I understood wisdom. I thought that it was this retributive theology where if I'm just righteous, then everything will go well for me. But I didn't understand that there is a whole lot more to it than that. Basically, what God does in Job is points to creation, which we know is where wisdom comes from, and says, you guys have reduced it into this either or kind of thing, and that's not what wisdom is at all. Wisdom is much more complex than that, and there are going to be things that you just don't understand. Notably here, God never tells Job the reason that God allowed all of those things to happen. I think that might be important for us to realize because so frequently as Christians, we want some sort of a reason for why things happen the way they do. I've heard my friends say, surely this happened for a reason. What is the reason? What is God trying to teach me through this? I think we need to be ready for God to say, who are you? I'm not going to give you a reason for this. There's a lot more going on than you can even understand. There's a lot more to wisdom and the way that the world works than you can even comprehend. Not only that, but importantly, what Job points out is that retributive theology is not always right. Job didn't do anything wrong. The Lord pretty much admits that. Job's main fault was that he didn't understand wisdom. He thought he understood it, but he didn't. And so, after the Lord had spoken these words, this is 42 verse 7, to Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, my wrath is kindled against you and against your two friends, for you have spoken what is not right to my servant Job. So I love this part because God finally yells at the stupid friends. Now, therefore, take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and offer up for yourselves a burnt offering. And my servant Job will pray for you, for I will accept his prayer not to deal with you according to your folly. They are fools, even though they've been spouting retributive theology, the theology of the Proverbs. For you have not spoken about me what is right, as my servant Job has done. So God kind of comes to this place, or the Lord comes to this place where the Lord's like, Job understands now. You guys are still idiots. So Eliphaz the Temanite and Bildad the Shuhite and Zophar the Naamathite went and did what the Lord told them to do, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. And the Lord restored the fortune of Job when he prayed for his friends, and the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. Then there came to him all of his brothers and sisters and all who had known him before, and they ate bread with him in his house. And they showed him sympathy and comforted him for all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him. The Bible says the Lord brought evil upon him. And each of them gave him a piece of money and a gold ring. The Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than the beginning, and he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 oxen, yoke of oxen, 1,000 donkeys. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He didn't get double on the kids. That would have been a lot of kids. 20 kids is a lot. He named the first Jemimah, the second Keziah, and the third Karen Hapuk. Jemimah is a boy's name. Nope, they're telling us the names of the daughters. Sorry. In all the land, there were no women so beautiful as Job's daughters, and their father gave them an inheritance along with their brothers. After this, Job lived 140 years and saw his children and his children's children 4 generations, and Job died old and full of days. So I don't know what you are going to make of that story. I can tell you that it is a counter-wisdom tradition and that it's there to promote this idea that wisdom is bigger than any of us can actually comprehend. And it's also there to promote this idea against Proverbs and say, not everything happens for a reason, right? You probably are well aware of the saying, everything happens for a reason. And people say that to one another to comfort one another. Job comes back against that and says, no, this didn't happen for any reason that God is willing to share with me. A righteous man suffered, and it's not because he did something wrong. Though the going wisdom of the time was, well, you had to have done something wrong. So that's something for us to keep in mind, that Job holds out this idea that you can be righteous and still suffer. You can follow wisdom and things may not go well for you. We need this. We need Job in our Bibles because we know that this is true, right? Maybe somebody you love got cancer and there's not a reason for it. They hadn't done anything wrong. Maybe somebody got killed in a car accident and it wasn't their fault. They weren't drinking and driving. They hadn't done anything wrong at all. Everything doesn't necessarily happen for a reason. And there are things about the primary wisdom tradition that in Proverbs that are true. It holds up this idea that if you work really hard, things will go well for you, right? That's what it says in Proverbs. If you work hard, things will go well for you. Well, you guys know, and I know, that sometimes you work really hard and things go really badly. Usually it is true that if you work hard, things will go well for you, but sometimes that's just not the case. And so I don't know exactly what to do with Job. I don't know what to do with the fact that he gets a whole bunch more livestock in his latter days, and that he has 10 more kids to replace the 10 that God killed. I don't quite know what to do with the fact that Yahweh is the one that keeps bringing Job up to Satan. I don't know what to do with any of that. But I do know that this narrative has struck a chord through the centuries because a righteous man suffers. And you and I can all probably name righteous people who have suffered, and people who have not been given a reason for their suffering. So, just in closing, I always show this little card. It's a card for people who have cancer. Please let me be the first to punch the next person who tells you that everything happens for a reason. I'm sorry you're going through this. So this is an Emily McDowell card, and she makes funny little cards that you can send to people. If you don't know what to say at all, like somebody finds out they have cancer, then you can send them a funny card that says, I'm really sorry about this. I'm not going to tell you it's happening for a reason. That's kind of what Job holds out. It's not a terrible thing to say everything happens for a reason, but there is a sense in which you need to recognize that even the Bible says, well, that's not always the case. So that's your first lesson in this counter-wisdom tradition. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you enjoy the little exercise that I have for you to do after this video.